Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Echo Pod, giving voice to community-led solutions. I'm Quincel, one of the Echo program coordinators, and to my far right, we have...
Hello, everyone. I'm Carice Guerzo. I am the Youth Programs Coordinator here at Little Manila Rising. I was a youth advocate for environmental justice last year and then transitioned into the position that I am now. So I help coordinate the youth advocate space as well as the Little Manila After School program. And I'll pass it to Bajleen.
Hi, everyone. My name is Bajleen Khalsa, she, her pronouns. I am currently an environmental justice youth advocate for Little Manila Rising, and I was part of the LMASP program last year in 2022. And I pass it to Haley.
Hello, everyone. I'm Haley, and I work really closely with Quincel, actually, as the ECHO program assistant.
Awesome. So we have these lovely ladies next to me, and today we'll be talking about the youth perspective on the COVID-19 pandemic and its overall impact on our well-being and just a reflection on the pandemic. But before we get started, we have a little trivia for each other. We did not prep this. I'll get started. So I'll ask Bajleen, does COVID-19, are one of the symptoms loss of sense of taste and smell?
Yes.
Correct. Okay.
Okay.
I can ask the next question.
To who?
I will ask it to Haley.
Oh, no.
And I will name my sources. This is from Johns Hopkins Medicine.
Wow.
Shout out Bajleen.
Reliable source.
So, true or false, Haley? You can get a face mask exemption card, so you don't need to wear a mask.
I've never heard of that before. Is that false?
Ding, ding, ding. The answer is false. Good job.
Okay. And then I guess I could go next. I want to ask Quincel this. So my source is actually from Johns Hopkins as well. And the question is, an effective hand sanitizer contains at least this percentage of alcohol to kill the coronavirus and other germs. So like what percent?
Oh, do you have hints?
Well, I'll give you I'll give you a range. Don't let me.
Okay.
Okay, 30 to 80%.
Oh, wow. I'm going to guess 70%?
Close.
Oh, dang. Dang.
It's 60%. So you're
Oh,
close.
okay.
Yeah, you're close.
So look out for hand sanitizers that have at least 60%. Okay, good to know. Everyone, when you shop for your hand sanitizers, look for that.
Yeah. And don't use those stinky ones.
Those what?
The stinky ones.
The stinky
Wait, what are the stinky?
You know how like during the pandemic, a lot of like stores they were using like the nasty smelling hand sanitizers brand.
That have like less than 60% probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
Dang.
Okay, I'll ask. This is for Haley. My source is also Johns Hopkins. True or false, herd immunity will end the coronavirus pandemic, so vaccinations are not necessary.
Wrong.
Yes, that is wrong.
Nice. Okay, I have another one that I'll ask. Did I ask you already?
The first
I'm
one.
gonna ask Carice. Okay, COVID-19 vaccines cause variants.
False.
Correct. So COVID-19 vaccines do not create or cause variants of the virus that cause COVID-19. Instead, the vaccines can help prevent new variants from emerging. My source is CDC.
Ooh.
Yes. So anyone else have any facts that they researched?
I'll ask Quincel one.
Oh.
True or false? Warm water or saline
Saline.
Saline. There you go. Saline will protect you from getting sick if you're exposed to the coronavirus.
Warm water?
Yes.
false.
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, cool.
debunking
What
all
is your
these
source?
myths.
Oh, John Hopkins, the one and only.
One of our favorites. Cool. So let's dive deep into our topic for today. So, what has been your guys' perspectives on how COVID-19 has affected you? Who wants to start?
What specifically? Just like,
Like your overall well-being, like your overall health. You can talk about like mental health or just your physical health, emotional health, whatever you're comfortable talking about.
I could start. So I caught COVID, I believe it was last year in July, and I had never gotten it before, so that was my first time. And I remember like the day that I tested positive, I was like going crazy. Like I was like, there's no way that I've been into this pandemic for 2 years and I barely catch it right now. And the thing was like, I was supposed to go on a family trip soon. Yeah, so I was like losing my mind. And during my whole COVID journey, I only had symptoms for like the first 3 days. And then after that, I felt like nothing other than like anxious and like having like bad mental health. And it was mostly because I was always telling myself like, okay, I've only had symptoms for this long, but I'm better. But I kept testing positive for 2 weeks straight. And I was staying isolated in my room all day for almost I think it was like 2.5 weeks. It was actually like right before I applied to be the ECHO program assistant.
Wow.
Yeah, so it wasn't that long ago, but yeah.
So you were relieved with all the physical symptoms, like the cough, body aches, and all that, but then you experienced the mental health aspect of it where it affected you in that light.
Yeah, definitely feel like the mental health aspect of being isolated and not being able to see anyone, being in one space for a really long time, that definitely felt worse than the actual like physical symptoms of COVID. Hmm.
Do all of you have any other experiences that you want to share?
I could go. I haven't gotten COVID yet, so I'm on a strike.
Oh my goodness.
I
Are
was
you fully vaccinated?
Yes, I am. I was gonna mention that. I am fully vaccinated and
Amazing.
everyone out there should be too. I was exposed and I think the reason why I kept testing negative and I did quarantine when my family got it. I left the house. And some of my close friends got it after a party, so I did the whole quarantine. I still tested negative. I wore masks. I made sure I was vaccinated on time. So I haven't gotten it yet, but, hopefully I don't get it soon either. But that's my experience with COVID so far.
Oh, I love that for you.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Do you have any friends or like close family members that you know that it affected negatively?
Yeah, so my family tested positive for COVID. And it was kind of weird because they were constantly home all the time. And we're a family that works a lot or we're out all the time. You never see us home. So now everyone was home and I was quarantining. We were all just quarantining separate because one person would test negative, the other would be positive. I also think just in my community in general with my friends as well as we've taken COVID pretty seriously. So whoever is exposed, we all rush to go get COVID tests. And anytime a vaccine is available, we rush to go get it. No matter what the myths may be, we just support science. So it's been pretty good. I would say it's more positive than negative for sure.
And they were in high spirits when they were in like isolation and everything.
Yeah, they had me as a daughter and a friend, so they can't really. I would FaceTime them. I would do as much as I could. So no matter I would make fun jokes. We would watch movies together. So yeah, it just depends. But I will pass it back to you, Quincel.
Yeah, or did you have anything you want to share? Okay. How about Like, what does overall health mean to both of you?
Health in general. I think there's a lot that can play into it. Health, uh, before the pandemic, health was seen more so as your physical health and your physical well-being, but more towards the pandemic, that was a worldwide. I forgot. My therapist used framed it specifically to where it was like a worldwide traumatic
Experience.
kind of. Yeah, I
Okay.
forgot how.
Like, we experience like collective grief and
Yeah.
Yeah.
in that sense.
Yeah, and so I think that after or during the pandemic, a lot of us now, or at least for me, I view health as not only your physical well-being in your physical state, but also your mental well-being, your mental state. Yeah.
I would say for health, just in general, at the time, people thought this was just before we would just think of it as like, oh, you got the flu, you got the cold, right? And now it's just, like every single time we talk about COVID, it's not just the physical aspects, just like you said, Haley. It's more about mental health as well, because that isolation period, we were constantly told not to be outside. So I personally, it didn't affect my family, but I knew after speaking to folks in the work we do, and just people couldn't even go outside. So they felt like they were detached from nature to be out in parks to take a walk. So just being like in this room, it's really suffocating. And I think this allowed for a lot of mental health like advocates as well to take a closer look at this, and just the healthcare industry in general to look into mental health, because staying in a close space for 2 weeks is, I would go insane. Like I wouldn't know what to do with myself. So yeah, it's hard.
Yeah. I just want to give a shout out to Carice for being a trooper and being here. I know she's experiencing some symptoms right now if she wants to share, but like,
Yeah. Sorry, I'm a little. Yeah, I'm okay. I'm okay. Yeah, I can share about my experience with COVID. I first got COVID in January of 2021, so before the vaccine came out. It was a pretty hard time. Sorry, my throat's a little weird right now.
she is COVID negative.
I am
by the
COVID
way.
negative.
She's tested like 3 times.
Just exhausted from the weekend.
We can talk about that too, like burnout, like anything you've experienced throughout the pandemic.
Yeah. Of course, yeah. We could start when I first got COVID, because it had a really, really big impact on my mental health. So like leading up to when I got COVID, I was having family members pass away from COVID. I also had one of my childhood best friends, her dad had just passed away from COVID, and my mom's coworker had just passed away from COVID. This was all within like 3 weeks. And sorry, my throat's being weird. And then like 2 weeks or 3 weeks after I found out that all these people were dying in my community, I got COVID myself, but I was away in school. And that was scary because I was living in an apartment with like 3 other people, and I was also around like my best friends who lived in the apartment next to us. And so I was scared that they were going to get it. My school was like isolating people because, like when COVID first happened, people didn't know how to respond, and people were like freaking out. And so like people got to get isolated in rooms on our college. And then when they ran out of rooms, they were putting us in hotel rooms. And so I was put in a hotel room by myself, and I was isolated for 2 weeks. And that was really, really hard for me mentally, knowing, also grieving at the same time, and still being expected to complete all my schoolwork and attend all my classes still through Zoom. And it was just difficult because it was also hard being a sociology major and learning about how health disproportionately impacts people of color, and experiencing that in my own community, and like having to intellectualize it in class while I was actively going through it just felt really unfair. And my mental health was really, really, really terrible. Like that was probably like one of the darkest moments of my life. Was experiencing a lot of depression and anxiety, and honestly was considering deferring like a semester and like not finishing college. Just felt like, why do we have to keep going through school when all this is happening and people are dropping like flies around me? And so, yeah, it was hard to be away from home and to be alone. And ever since I got COVID, that time I freaked out every time I got sick after that, because yeah, being isolated for 2 weeks is not fun.
Like you're more hyper vigilant of like when you experience something like, oh, I have to, take care of my loved ones, and like not just like for yourself, but yeah, for your people you're close to.
I also think it's like more of like trauma as well, is that especially like how you're saying like you lost so many lives, right, in your community, or it's like, well, it could be me tomorrow, or who am I gonna get a phone call from, right? About another family member or another community member that I'm gonna lose. So, and then also like being stuck on Zoom, like I didn't think of that. Like I was on Zoom my whole junior year, like that was really it. I'm a big like visual learner, and I think when you were on Zoom, a lot of the times, if you had a sucky teacher, you just kind of sat in bed. Sitting in bed was the way.
Yeah, I definitely did that.
Yeah, me too. I was gonna ask something. So, with your guys' experience, both of you guys, I don't think you were in school at the time of the pandemic, right? Yeah. How do you think how was it going back after the pandemic for you guys? Like, personally, here, I could go first.
I was like, who's going first?
No, I can go first. So, like,
You can answer your own question.
I know, I'll just answer it myself. No, but, so, like, personally, for me, it was a lot of what my experience, like, staying at home, being on Zoom all the time. I was doing my classes in bed. I was not waking up early, like, and, the thing was, some of the teachers I had at the time were very, like, strict to, like, kind of what Chris mentioned, about expecting you to get all this stuff done. But at the same time, we're all, like, stressing. We don't know what would happen. But because of that long of a period of not really talking to people, like, even in my family, we weren't even allowed to see our family, because our family was very strict on isolation, because we had a lot of people who were kind of higher risk. So like I have an auntie, vulnerable. So like I had an auntie with cancer. I had old grandparents and that can easily get sick. I had baby cousins that get sick so easily.
Their immune systems haven't built up yet.
Yeah, exactly. So going back to school in person, it was very hard for me. So like at the time too, I was the ASB president at my school, and so I would have to go to board meetings and stuff. And one of the things that they had mentioned at one of the board meetings, well, this was still like online, they asked like, oh, what is your opinion on going back to school? And I told them, like, I don't think it's a good time right now. I think we should push it off a little bit more so that by the time our graduation comes, maybe we do have the chance of being in person. I kind of told them, like, it was too soon. And also understanding, like, the mental health aspect of our students, because a lot of our students at the time kind of, I don't want to say lost, but didn't have as much, like, communication skills, or how do you say it? Like
how to navigate this unknown of,
like, how they kind of forgot how to talk to each other because
that's
of, like,
a thing. That is a thing.
And so that definitely was something I brought up to them. And then they kind of were just like, oh, okay. that was it. Like, yeah, there's some other stuff about that specific school board, but yeah, it was very just like they didn't listen, and we ended up going back to school anyway. So, yeah.
Mine was actually, we went back. I was junior year, so junior year we were on Zoom, and then senior year we went back, and we were just like, okay, I think personally, like, we wore masks, but then a lot of the times, sometimes we would opt out, right? And then I remember, like, our principal would come in and would be like, COVID isn't gone, but we're not going to tell you. Like, they wouldn't enforce masks, but they would be like, if you want to wear it, it's recommended. And then anytime anyone was exposed to COVID in your classroom, they would come tell you, but then like whoever was sitting next to the person, they would only tell them to go get tested. Whereas personally, I think if the whole classroom is, you're sitting inside and the doors aren't constantly open, there's no ventilation coming through, you should still go get tested. Which is like anytime my friends in class, we would find out that someone's exposed, we would be like, okay, we gotta go get tested. Like who has a COVID test? Where are we going? Right. So I think like just my friends, it was very like, okay, let's make sure we watch out for one another because the school wasn't doing much. But then I think towards the end of my senior year, it became an issue of like, where can we go? Because we were seniors and we were like, we want our grad trip. Like, why can't we go? And they started like using COVID as a way to like take stuff away from us, which, you know, understandable. And it was a pandemic. But then for our graduation, they had it outside. And there was like, I was sitting next to someone closer than how Chris is sitting next to me. So it was like, there was misconceptions already at our school. And I think it had to do, again, with the school board and the way just the administration was working. But there's definitely more thoughts about that at another time.
Oh my gosh.
That's a different conversation.
Oh my goodness. I'm not gonna lie, I feel like I blocked out that entire year out of my head just because it was so traumatic. But we did go back to school in September or October. I think October of 2021, which is pretty fresh. Or no, 2020? I can't remember anymore. Honestly, time like before COVID, I can't even comprehend what time is like anymore.
Yeah.
We did go back to school though. I went to a small private Christian college in Santa Barbara called Westmont. I have many problems with how that school is ran. It's very outdated, still fighting for human rights that we already have there.
Wow.
Another topic.
Yeah, that's another topic. But
We're brainstorming for future podcasts.
Right.
but
We
like,
are.
you know, but like masking and vaccines is directly correlated with that. And I can't even remember anymore. I like genuinely blocked out my memory. I almost want to say yes. Yes, for like the beginning of it for sure.
And then when the vaccines came out, I noticed like some universities were like, yes, and then no.
Yeah.
I think it became a personal preference at that point once the whole Costco thing went down and everyone was like out of lockdown, grabbing toilet paper.
What's it called?
The whole
like the
trauma-
shortage.
Yeah, the whole shortages went down.
Frantic.
And I think after the second vaccine, right, like the second dose, I think that's when people were like, oh, they're just going to keep coming out with vaccines. It's not really going to go away. Like, then it just, people started taking it to their own hands. Whereas, you know, I remember in March of 2020 is when we found out. And I want to share this story because I didn't know COVID-19 existed during my sophomore year of high school. So when I was finding out, people were talking about like this Chinese disease. That's what they would call it. I'm like, what? And my brain just triggers to stuff like that because I'm a poli-sci major. I'm like, what? What did you just call this? Like, why are you being racist to one race? So
Why are you calling it that?
yeah. So then I was like, wait, what are you talking about this? And then my best friend told me, no, there's a disease that's originating out of China, but our administration at that time had called it, you know, several names, and we don't need to recap that. And then I started doing research, and that's how I found out about COVID-19. Like, there was so much misinformation. So I think after the second vaccine, people were just like, okay, well, we got to return to our lives like normally, but like nothing's ever been normal since we've gotten COVID. Yeah.
Do you guys think like even now we've returned to normal, or what would you guys say is normal? Silence.
I feel like, I've kind of also blocked out like
The
that
pandemic,
portion of like us navigating through the unknown, like collective, like globally. Like I feel like we're never gonna go back to what we were like pre-March 2020 or winter of 2019. Like I don't even really remember what that's.
what life was like before.
Yeah.
Y'all blocked your trauma.
No, it's
We need to go to
I feel like
therapy.
the personal, like collective grief, personal and collective grief that we all went through.
Well, I remember it.
lot.
I still remember mine. I was like, this was yesterday for me.
Yeah, and then like your stories that you shared, Carice. Like, thank you for sharing that with us. And it just made me think of, yeah, what I have gone through and like losing loved ones that I've mentioned to Haley. And that's why I feel like the work that Echo does is really important. And to be on the ground and to like educate people on these like misinformation, disinformation that's still going around to this day is really important. And like, yeah, you could save a life through just debunking one myth and promoting the vaccine.
Well, that's the crazy thing about misinformation, because you mentioned, like, do you think we'll ever go back to like normal, right? Like when a person sneezed, it was like, oh, it's allergies, it's the cold. It's now you're like, do you got COVID, right? And you're like,
Test?
do you, like, let me wear a mask, like you're like, right? And then
For real.
and then also you're like,
No, like the moment someone starts coughing with not covering anything, I'm like, ew, you're nasty. Like, cover it up. Yeah.
No, and it's crazy because I started at EOP this year, and I remember my professors opening doors for ventilation, right? Like, I've never had people open doors in classrooms. Like, I remember them being closed. Like, we had everything open. We were freezing, but like, I'm grateful for that, because if someone had gotten COVID, we would all been infected. But like, the crazy thing about the normal side of that is that, like, I wouldn't even say it's normal. Like, the administration had such a big influence on the misinformation that was spread during COVID. And I think that's why it's like, it's still affecting people today, because they technically don't know what it is and they don't understand the science of how there's different variants. So, but that's one thing I will say, like, the misinformation that was spread during that administration, right, has set like a new like tone for what comes out of the government's mouth about like scientific stuff or anything, like as a global pandemic. Because if you like go back to like polio and stuff, people still freaked out about it, but the approach was different, right? You don't see as much as misinformation, or you don't see as much as fake news, if that's what you want to call it, going out. So I think the administration in itself handled COVID very differently, and that affected the community. And today, like, we're still debunking myths, even though we shouldn't have to.
Yeah. That's really eye-opening, actually.
You know, actually, I never really thought about it through that perspective.
Yeah.
I always have to get political. Sorry, y'all.
Don't
The
apologize.
political is personal. The personal is political.
And like, I feel like they have politicized vaccines too. That's like another topic. And that's why like some of the events we've really been promoting pediatric vaccine uptake, because it's to this day it's still pretty low compared to the overall vaccine uptake for adults, and yeah, for like primary series and with boosters. So right now I have the San Joaquin County statewide vaccine data pulled up, and as of today, or 3/23, we're filming this late March, the vaccine uptake for bivalent boosters is still really low. It's 18.4%. So I still really feel that COVID-19 work is really important, and we're one of the only, Echo Team is one of the only organizations in our county who's continuing that work, and I think it's still really important that we continue that. Yeah. Because 18.4%, that's so low. And we need more people vaccinated to stay protected and keep our loved ones safe, especially like what Haley said, like the most vulnerable in your close circle of family and friends, like keep them safe.
I think going back to like that question you asked about how it changes like what normal is now, I definitely have become more conscious of like people who may be like immunocompromised, or like elderly folks, or just like I'm definitely more conscious now of when I'm going to be going to like a public space. Like maybe I will want to wear a mask when I go. Like I still wear a mask when I go on airplanes. Like that is just so I cannot.
Yeah.
I can't.
It's not fathom people
like
who
two.
don't.
Even at the doctors too. Oh my gosh, I have to wear a mask.
I also think it depends on like what mask you wore. I traveled in August last year, and I was wearing those 95 K95, and me and my sister were wearing like I don't know which ones.
surgical
The
ones?
surgical ones underneath. And
Yes.
like my mom was doing that too. And people thought, like, we were traveling with our family for a wedding and everyone was like, you're gonna like suffocate. And I'm like, I'd rather suffocate than like get COVID, right? Like, I'd rather be safe, because what if I catch it and give it to someone else?
I mean, it shows your practices have worked. You haven't caught it.
I haven't, thank God.
It's true.
Knock on wood.
I know, for real.
I had a question for everyone. Why does everyone think like the number's so low? Like the percentage for, I believe this is like pediatric. I probably am messing up the words already. That word.
Pediatric.
Kids vaccines. Why do you all think those might be low?
I think it also stems from parents, like what their parents hear from their circles, and then it carries on to their kids, because we respect our parents and our elders, and whatever we receive from them, we follow.
See, I have a fun story about this. That's why I brought it up.
She's setting the stage for her story.
No, because initially when in my family, we heard my family was the target of misinformation. My parents were like, "Oh my God, what is this?" And my parents were like, when the vaccine came out, I was like, "I want to get it." And they're like, "No, no, 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 their kid has gotten it. Like, what if you die or something?" And I'm like sitting there, the little troublemaker I am. I'm like, "Why am I dying? Like, I could die from COVID. Why not take the chance?" So I remember my mom had to get it for work, and I remember just taking her, and I had her sign something. I just had her sign the form, and she had no idea what it was. Please don't do this, because your parents should know what they're doing and what they're signing. But it was the form, and she doesn't read or speak English or anything, so I use this to my advantage, but only do that for this, nothing else.
You're like, this is for her safety in the long run.
Yes. And I went into Walgreens with her, and I was like, the doctor was like, "You have it signed?" I'm like, "Yes." And I got the vaccine. I came home with one vaccine. And then the second time, my dad was like, "No, let's wait till you get the second one." I took him and my uncle, and they weren't asking for a parent signature, because at that time, kids could get vaccines without the parent
was
signatures, right?
CDC and FDA.
Yeah. And so I just went there and I sat there and I'm like, "Lady, can I get a..." Yeah. She was like, "Cool." And she just gave it to me. So that's how I got all my vaccines, because my parents wanted me and my sister to wait. But I was like, no, I'm not going to. Because I also think it depends, like, about the misinformation that comes to parents. It's because some of them don't understand the language, right? Because my parents are immigrants. They had no idea what was going on. And I think it also depends on how your community is affected, right? In the Sikh community, right, there's a lot of people that don't believe in COVID-19. They think, especially for, like, talking about people in India, like family, they're like, this is something that, you know, the administration just threw out there to kill people.
Yeah,
Right?
they were saying like, "Oh, I saw this Facebook post or like WeChat post about, you know, they just spread it through the airplanes and like they sprinkle COVID through."
I was like, if someone has that much power, whoa. But like, it was like Facebook and WhatsApp was taking over people's lives.
Sorry, not WeChat.
Yeah, please, any sick woman watching this out there, please don't be on WhatsApp spreading fake news. Please don't do that. Yeah, please don't do that. But I think like people didn't believe in COVID, and then my parents ended up being a victim of that. And then we had to explain it, and they were really understanding. But I've noticed like, and I think it helped when two of the Sikh temples, Stockton and in Manteca, they had health clinics. They had the vaccine set up, so people were willing to go down there and get it. But I think now, like stemming away from that, like they only hosted the vaccine clinic, but they weren't able to debunk the information. They weren't able to tell people like, okay, now you should get your boosters too, right? It was it was just the 2 vaccines, and okay, we're done. COVID is gone. And so I think a lot of communities get affected by the misinformation because they don't speak the language, but then also their community is just pushed off to the side.
Yeah,
And that's
it's
really hard.
multifactorial. And something I brought up to Haley as we both were onboarded around the same time is that's why I feel like the work is so important, because my family has been a victim of the misinformation, disinformation, and through that misinformation, I have lost loved ones because they didn't take the vaccine. And that actually caused internal like family conflict, because I was one of the very first ones to get it and I was a huge advocate for it. And then you have elders in your family who are like, no, what are you
Yeah.
promoting, you know? Yeah. Do you guys have any stories you want to share?
Oh yeah, my family definitely. I definitely have some like people who don't believe in the vaccine. Definitely believed in like those myths about COVID, like oh it's the administration like causing this, which is so wrong, right? Because it's like, I mean, when COVID first came out, people were like, well, it will impact mostly like immunocompromised folks as well as like the elderly community, and like how can you say that this was like given by the administration, like you're okay with it affecting those populations, like with those populations like dying, or I don't know. So I definitely found that problematic, and I also got the vaccine even though my parents were super against it.
Don't do what I did though.
Look at all of us, the troublemakers were.
Yeah, so I also went ahead and gotten the vaccine, and then was able to get fully vaccinated through like Echo's free health clinics.
Really?
Yeah,
Yay.
I got like the most recent one with Haley.
Nice, with the incentives. Okay.
Yeah, y'all got
She got that
incentives.
$25
Target gift
card.
card.
Come to our events.
Yeah.
Promotion.
Follow us.
Follow us on Instagram. Yeah.
No, but yeah, that's really interesting that all 4 of us all were in that same position of having family members who were like iffy about the vaccines and iffy about COVID. Like for me too, so my parents are divorced, and one side of my family was like heavy on like, you need to isolate, nobody can see each other, like very strict on like following COVID guidelines. While the other side of my family was the complete opposite. They were like, they didn't believe in the vaccine, they didn't really believe in COVID. So it was a really weird dynamic to like be put in, because at the same time, like, it's your family at the end of the day, so it's hard to be like, to kind of, I don't know how to word it, but it's hard to I guess go against them, but at the end of the day you have to do what's best for yourself and what you believe in for your own health, whether that's your physical health, mental health, whatever it is. Yeah.
You bring up an interesting point, because I'm just realizing this as I'm sitting and listening to Haley. There's 2 Sikh temples like that I go to. Mantika was really strict, right? So the like administration there, they were like no more than 2 people inside, or there's boxes made. And I thought it was silly, because I was like, I just want to go in there and pray and come out, right? And at that time I was like, why are you making me do all this work and all this stuff just to pray, right? But I'm so glad those precautions were taken, because if you come to Stockton, it wasn't as heavily enforced. It was recommended, but it wasn't enforced. Whereas Mantika, they enforced it. Like you couldn't, like they would call you out. And then I heard from a couple of other community members, right? Stockton folks didn't really wear masks a lot in the Sikh temple. So when people from like my family would come from, or family friends would come from like San Jose, they would be wearing masks, and they would be like, how have you guys not gotten COVID yet, right? Like they enforced it so much in the community in the Sikh temple in San Jose, but like Stockton, it just felt like it was a free for all. Like it was recommended, but they didn't enforce it. Whereas Mantika, so like I see the kind of the family structure here too, because I was like if I just wanted to go and pray and like, you know, be out in like 5-10 minutes, I would just go to Stockton. But then if I like was going with my family and I wanted to be safe, I went to Mantika. Yeah. I am guilty of that, because I have done it, but I don't do that anymore.
So like the disconnect between the cities and counties was really apparent.
Oh no, 100%.
I don't know if this is going off topic a little bit, and I don't know how much time we have left, but something that I also thought of was, we're all talking about why did I say like that? I like said it like an accent for some reason. Oh, anyways, but we're all talking about like how our families and how we've been put through like the division of how we see COVID and how we view vaccines. Do you guys think there's kind of like cultural, how do I say it? Like, or
Like, do you mean like a cultural aspect of why they're against these
That, yeah,
protocols with vaccines?
I think so. That and like, yeah, basically. Sorry, I'm like, I don't know how to word it.
I don't know. I think the pushback comes, at least for me personally, there's the religious aspect of it and the cultural aspect of it. Is like the debates I personally have gone through with family is, oh, you don't need it, you just have to pray about it. Or, but then I was like, we can pray about it, but we can pray about the folks who are making the vaccine so that way they can produce a vaccine that will readily, like
Cure us.
cure us and cure us in the long run.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was always trying to navigate like how, like reframe like, oh, just pray about it, just pray about it. Like there's different ways to look at it. And I was telling them like you could be, you could still promote your religion and still believe in science. Like there's beauty in that. Like there's beauty in science and religion intertwining is what I personally had to navigate a lot during the pandemic. But
I think what it has to do with culturally is the one thing I saw was people don't believe in science in my community that much. Whether they're in any country and not just the United States, but it was like I would hear people talking to my mom and they'd be like, the Google CEO is the one that caused COVID. And I'm like, I don't even know who that is. Like, thank you.
he
Right.
brought it.
I'm
'cause
like,
he went to China
I
or
don't know who
something.
that
No.
is. But it was the fact that people, like, this is actually, it's frustrating because, I belong to that community. I'm trying to debunk all this stuff and working constantly in this community is to make sure people actually follow the facts, right? It's like, okay, there's this thing, it's called COVID-19. It's affecting all of us. Why don't we follow the science, right? Why are we just going after the myths? And I also think, I understand what you're saying about religion too, because I remember people around me would be like, it'll be fine if you just pray to God and it'll go away. I'm like, I understand that you pray to God and you believe it'll go away. 100% respect your beliefs, but also you can also make sure the next person sitting next to you is safe if you take the necessary precautions. So for me, it was more of a cultural debate because it was just the fact that people didn't want to learn and get out of this bubble of like actually being open to another opinion. Like for me, like I've been told like you don't know anything because you're so young, you haven't experienced life. And then the fact I'm a woman and the fact I'm a woman coming from a very like male dominated culture, it's like, okay, thank you for that comment, but then can you listen to the other doctor that might be a male? So I think it varies on where you're located and what you believe.
Yeah, that made me think too about like how there was, I don't know, there was this whole thing that were like, I'm not gonna wear a mask, I'm not gonna vaccine. But then like when it came to your neighbor, I mean, if we're putting in like, cause I grew up in a Christian home and it's always like, oh, you have to look out for your neighbor, watch out for your neighbor. It's like, okay, well, you're so bent on like your personal beliefs, but it's like, what if your actions can actually protect the people around you? I don't know. There was just a lot of like clashing thought processes there for me. But yeah, I feel like we've really been talking about the intersections between like COVID and like race, class, religion, culture. And like one thing that I noticed, not necessarily religion related, but like I guess class related or low income communities versus like really wealthy, affluent communities. Because like I was in Santa Barbara at the time, it is pretty white and pretty rich, and people didn't wear masks there. And then when I'd go to LA, like on the occasion where I don't know, me and my friends wanted to eat some good food because Santa Barbara, everyone's there. I would notice that a lot of the communities in LA actually it'd be very masked up in those communities. So it's really interesting to see like, oh, COVID doesn't exist in Santa Barbara, seemingly, but it does exist.
But traveling 30 minutes further south, it does.
Yeah, and then like when they would have like shutdowns in LA, everyone would come to Santa Barbara because it was like more lax there.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, it was interesting. So
Well,
just another
for me,
thought.
it's like, okay, so you brought up race, and I was trying not to do this, but I'm going to.
Like I said, this is
I think it was interesting. By the way, I am a political science major, if I haven't mentioned this already, so you get context. But I thought it was interesting in Congress to see what like certain demographic was wearing masks and which wasn't, and then which one was advocating for
story about
what
this.
and wasn't. You know, like I'm not gonna name names. Whatever your beliefs are, I respect to you. But I think it was just like, TikTok was blowing it up. So whoever was on TikTok, like if a representative or a senator or anyone in power in Congress was wearing a mask wrong, they would be put on the spot because initially a lot of like us folks, we look up to our administration, whoever's in administration, to be like, okay, wait, what are their actions, right? Yeah. But then you saw like, and if you look towards this as well, you can go on YouTube, wherever you get your news feed, you can see the difference in the demographics of how they were wearing masks, what type of masks. And you know what's interesting is that I believe, someone please fact check me, but I believe people in Congress were vaccinated, even though some people in the administration were going against and saying you don't need to be vaccinated. So that was interesting to me because I know everyone in Congress, for them to return back, they had to take some necessary means of vaccination.
or even like test
Or
before
even
being
test. I'm
these
pretty sure they were
spaces.
vaccinated from what I remember reading. But then at the same time, they were giving speeches on their floor saying like, the vaccine has a microchip, or, where's our freedom by wearing masks, and
They
like
bring up the
amendments and stuff.
Oh, what's wrong with our body, our choice?
Oh yeah, that's an
Yeah, that's
interesting.
like-
Oh, that was
With
the
the
one.
mask,
Yes.
Yeah, it's
That's a
another
whole
topic.
other thing.
yeah. Yeah. No, that's really interesting because I do have like an experience about that with race and masks. It was actually during the early pandemic, so it was still like 2020.
before the vaccines.
Yeah. It was before the vaccines. So my sister and I were going somewhere with one of our family members, and at the time, me and my sister were like, we don't want to go because the pandemic had like just happened, and we didn't want to go around people. We didn't want to like travel anywhere, but she took us anyways, and we ended up going. And I remember while we were there, so this was in Tahoe, and we were walking down the strip. Me and my sister, both Asian, were the only ones wearing masks. We walked down this group of white teenagers, and we're minding our own business, just walking past them. All of a sudden, one of them like coughs on us as we walk by. And in the moment, I was like, what was that? And then I turned around and I was like, what the
What the heck?
What the heck?
What the heck?
But yeah, it was just in the moment, like I didn't know how to respond to that because we already like crossed paths and they were just laughing, and I was just like,
no.
That's
yeah, it's
no.
it was very triggering.
So
to
I'm
say the
gonna
least.
fact check myself real quick. I'm on CNN Politics, and CNN has confirmed that all of the 219 House Democrats said they received the COVID-19 vaccine, but 97 out of 211 Republicans said that they had received the vaccine. So there is a difference in administration, but it was just noticing those little discrepancies of people getting vaccinated and not. Like you could tell which ones weren't going to and which ones were. And race does play a big factor in it, and how you wear your mask as well. But like I'm sorry you had to go through that. Like they just coughed on you and were like, haha.
And mocked you too.
Yeah, and it was a group of them. So me and my sister were
Oh my
just like,
gosh.
Yeah, please walk away.
yeah, no, we walked away. I wish I would have said something in the moment, but I was just like shocked.
Yeah.
that
And
it
then you were
actually
like, keep your
happened,
mask. 'Cause
What
what if
just
they
happened?
actually had
Yeah.
it? Who knows?
Yeah.
But yeah, going back to your comment about culture, I looked up on NIH, with National Library of Medicine. They did this study that I've read about, like how Filipino communities were affected, because I would say like when we were in settings with like family parties, a lot of us like touch each other and like hug each other. And like another thing we do is called manopo, which is like you bless your elders. But then during the pandemic, like we've had to do contactless greeting during the pandemic, and that has affected us like emotionally, mentally, and yeah, it took a toll on us like collectively because we had to see each other through FaceTime, through Zoom, and like to have to teach our elders how to use these technological devices. Like that was another thing.
Yeah.
So
I
A
think.
lot of oh,
Go ahead.
sorry, a lot of like Filipino families, like you said, are always together. We always have family gatherings. Like with us, we would go to my grandma's house like at least once a week.
oh wow.
Yeah, just to eat dinner or just to hang out or whatever. But after the pandemic, that definitely changed. Like, and definitely like the interactions, like you said, changed as well. So yeah, I definitely see that and how it's like valid.
Yeah, I was gonna say not just like culturally, that's a word. Greeting each other, like when you see your friends, you hug them, you guys like mess around, right?
Yeah.
And then you can't just do that. You just have to be stuck on the screen. Like you just, I wouldn't say like it affected me personally because I like my space. But I think that affects your mental health a lot because you lost this form of physical touch, right? So I don't know how, maybe someone else has experiences on the team that it like not being able to have physical touch with just family members that affected like during COVID that may have affected your mental health during the pandemic.
Yeah, it definitely affected mine, and not having to see my family as often because I also worked in the ER during the pandemic, and having to just navigate that, like seeing other people's grief on top of like what my family was going through. That was, yeah, really tough for me personally, and that had led me to seek out therapy. So shout out to therapy for
Shout out therapy.
Shout out to therapy.
helping me navigate through this personal and collective grief, and helping me become more self-aware, and to help my community, navigate through that as well.
Yeah, I don't know if y'all maybe have maybe had to attend a funeral during COVID, but oh my goodness, I attended a couple like virtual funerals like over Zoom, and then like in the April after the COVID like was announced in March, my apong, so my great grandmother was in the hospital, and so it was so weird during that time where she was like. She was back in my auntie's house, but like we in the days where like she was passing away, like we all came to the house, but we were all masked up. It was so weird, like not hugging each other, and we all had to sit outside, like in the chairs in the backyard. And then like when the actual funeral happened, like so many people, I don't know, I've gone to so many funerals in my life, like I don't know, people just die really a lot in my family. And so like usually funerals are like it's a bittersweet time because you also get to see your family and be with them, and like eat, but also grieve. And like so that was like the shortest funeral I've ever gone to, and they buried her in like 30 minutes. It felt so like disrespectful and so fast, and like we couldn't watch we had to sit at our cars while they like literally just lowered her so fast and like dug it and like put the dirt on so fast. And it's usually a whole ceremony, you know? And it just felt so like disrespectful and felt so weird.
Yeah.
I was like, yo, like this is our debt. Like these are our ancestors that we're like burying, and it just felt so wrong. But yeah, it's rough with the whole touch, and yeah. COVID is traumatic for real.
It's never too late to start therapy.
I know.
Yeah, and I'm glad that we're all sharing space talking about this, because whoever's watching this, like, know that you're not alone in this experience of grief and trauma and just navigating through the unknown of the pandemic. But yeah, before we close off, I just want to recognize that, the pandemic was both a social and health crisis, and that social isolation really affected our overall health. And just want to thank you guys for sharing your experiences and for shedding light into what we all went through the past 3 years.
Well, thank you for having us.
Of course. Shout out Echo for
Shout out
reaching out to
Quintel.
Bajleen and I. Yeah.
if you guys want to plug in your programs before we close off.
Oh, yes. So, well, we are kind of in the middle of the program, but LMASP, our Little Manila After School program, will be starting up again in October. We are in like our last 2 months of it.
We have an alum here.
Yes, we do have two
alums
LMASP
right here.
over here.
Yes.
There's exciting things coming. Yeah, and same with the Youth Advocates program. I mean, we are in the middle of it, but we'll be starting up again
love the
later
youth
this year.
advocate.
Yeah, I am a current environmental justice youth advocate, and I'm learning so much and making so many connections. Shout out to Carice for always answering my emails. There's so many.
I try my best.
But yeah, we're learning a lot about Stockton, and it's been a great experience. And that's why I'm on this podcast as well, because Haley and Quincell reached out to Carice and me, and we're here. So I'm making a lot of connections.
Yes, but feel free to follow us on social media.
What is the
It's
account called?
Oh, the account, yes. So the Youth Advocates one is called @LM Advocates. And then Little Manila After School program on Instagram, I believe, is
I think it's LMASP.
I think
Little
maybe
Manila.
We'll
Little
include
Manila.
it in the bio.
We'll figure it out.
I do not remember right now.
Do you want to plug in Echo?
Oh yeah, so for Echo's Instagram, we're just at Echo Little Manila. You can stay in touch with us. That's where we post a lot of our clinics, free COVID testings. COVID vaccines.
tests,
And then
clinics.
I think we're also doing health screenings as well.
Yeah, so there's health screenings, and then everything that we offer is free.
Yeah.
And we partner with local health jurisdictions, and yeah, we're on the grounds, tabling at events, canvassing.
Yep, we're always
Some
out
of us
there.
are out there right now.
Yeah,
doing
we're
it.
always out there in the rain.
In the rain, wow.
Rain or shine.
They're committed, because I went out with them once and I was done.
But yeah, she is the brains behind our Instagram at Echo Little Manila. So follow us. Thank you for being here with me today, Carice.
I also got the
Marjeline.
account, sorry.
Oh yes, yeah. Before we hop off.
LMASP Instagram is @LMASP Stockton.
Yes, follow. But yes, thank you, Carice, Marjeline, and Haley for joining me today. That was awesome.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you,
you.
everyone. Bye. Oh, I hear it.
Yeah.